America, we stand for freedom. Though freedom is never really free, we yearn and strive for government, protecting our liberty.
Good evening and welcome to Your Right to Know by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. My name is Mary Lotze and I will be your host for this evening's show. And tonight we're going to actually do a little bit of a follow-up of a show we did earlier in the year. It was, to be exact, our April show of 2016. And at April, or during April, we met, as I'm going to introduce you all as our esteemed political panel. We met after the primary, the presidential primary election, to talk about the results of the primary and who we were looking at to be the Republican, the GOP nominee to become president of the United States and then to go on, hopefully, to be the president. I'm going to introduce you to our panel now and we'll jump right into the discussion. I have my good friend and radio co-host with me on WPKZ Once a Month, Kathy Goguen. I have the chairman of our Fitchburg Republican City Committee, and again, a friend, Dr. John Strang, and another friend from Leominster, and committee man of the Mass GOP, Frank Ardinger. Thank you all for coming. Of course, we're missing Justin tonight. I just want to let you know that we are missing one from our April show, Justin Brooks. He couldn't join us, but that's okay, because we have a lot to talk about. I would really encourage our viewers to go back, if you want to see how right we were in our predictions, to go back and view our April 2016 Your Right to Know show, where we did predict, and congratulations panel, rightfully you picked Donald Trump to prevail as President of the United States. And at that time after the show, you all kind of chastised me because I didn't say who I thought was going to be the president, and I will now admit to everybody, to my chagrin, I did think Hillary Clinton was going to win. So I do have a smile on my face, so I guess that tells you I'm glad I was wrong once in my life. So let's jump right in and we'll talk about what's transpired over the last 6 months and what Donald Trump really did that spoke to so many people. Why do you believe, and I'm just going to throw this out to all of you, why do you believe that Donald Trump was still able to elevate himself above the incoming? And oftentimes the incoming was self-inflicted, talking about women in a very misogynistic maybe way, disparaging way, pointing out veterans like John McCain and calling him a non-hero, pointing out the Khan family, Gold Star family, and really pinpointing that. So Donald Trump really was a unorthodox and maybe a very impolite candidate. And yet people still resoundingly listened to him and supported him right through to the bitter end. Why do you think that's true? Whoever wants to jump in first.
They knew who he was already. I mean, Donald Trump wasn't new to the stage. He had TV shows and he was a businessman, and so people knew what he was. I think that anything he said, it was like, oh, here he goes again, but they didn't hold it against him because they knew that was his personality.
They didn't internalize
it. They didn't internalize it.
They looked at his bluster
I mean, they looked at his blusters and
act.
his gaffes and, oh dear, he probably shouldn't have said that. But they knew what kind of person he was. And so they weren't surprised.
I think his message was overshadowed that in many people's mind. The media obviously picked up on all the gaffes and all the the negative
and ran with it.
They blasted it every place. But if you listen to what he was really saying, he made a lot of sense, and I think people saw through that media blitz and understood his message.
Mm-hmm. John?
That's certainly true. I agree with both my colleagues here. The media focused on remarks like this and focused on them ad nauseum. Admittedly, he made these gaffes. But if you actually looked at his, or went to, as I think you did, his rallies.
Couple rallies.
It was very different you know, very different. If you didn't have the opportunity to go to those rallies, but you saw it on TV, and many of them were carried in full on Fox, at least, you were very impressed, I think. You know, actually recalling something that my colleague Kathy here said in the April program, I think your opening words were, Trump speaks to the frustrations that people are feeling.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I think that was a direct apprehension perception on the part of the American people, that he was a spokesman for those frustrations.
Okay.
And that overpowered everything else. The gaffes, by comparison, didn't affect him.
Well, this may then go into my next question, because what I'm really looking at is, we know Trump, even though some of the votes are still being counted in some areas, but Trump really lost the popular vote by over 1 million. Somewhere it's still being questioned. But he overwhelmingly won the Electoral College. And he was successful in winning the Electoral College because of two things. He won almost all of the flyover states. And also, he turned a lot of traditionally Democratic or blue states to red states. Why did he do that? Is that because he spoke to so many individuals and so many people on just some of these issues?
I think he turned a lot of the blue states into red states because they're the ones that are suffering economically from the policies of the Democrats for the last 30 years. And his message resonated with those people, and they saw that in his message a way out of the situation where they're stuck with no jobs, low-paying jobs, a lousy economy, and they wanted something to change.
Mm-hmm. John?
Yeah, that certainly is true. I think we're going to be analyzing the actual statistics concerning his victory for a long time to come. I looked at some of the polls, like the Pew organization, which has been generally trusted, and it shows that among the factors, clearly there was the turnoff factor to Hillary Clinton, since she did not draw, anything close to what she needed to draw to win. And it should be noted that even Obama, in his 2008 presidential run, he drew 5 million people fewer than he had 4 years earlier. And undoubtedly Clinton will draw even fewer than that, when the actual full details are in. And obviously Trump drew overwhelmingly the white vote, the white working class vote, which had been essentially written off as a policy decision on the part of the Democrat Party as far back as 2011. When they actually issued a memo to the effect that they were not going to focus on them anymore. So it was a combination of stupid decisions on the part of the Democrats, enthusiasm on the part of the Trump supporters, and the fact that, of course, as Frank pointed out here, it was particularly hitting home in the so-called Rust Belt states, so that these Midwestern states across the board almost went for Trump, and that's not something that happened in 2004 and 2008. 2008.
It almost seemed in some ways, and I suppose maybe this happens in every campaign because of the media and the way it is. People like sound bites, but it became a real sound bite campaign. And I think of when and it was the sound bites that kind of stuck. And the sound bites I'm thinking of is Crooked Hillary, Drain the Swamp, which was a very popular one. But then we also got the basket of deplorables.
Right.
And it seems like people really responded. They identified whether the soundbite came from Trump or whether it came from Hillary herself with the basket of deplorables. People really responded to those sound bites. Do you think the sound bites connected with people as well as part of the message?
I think especially that basket of deplorables did. Who is Hillary Clinton to be insulting people? It almost said, well, I'm better than you are, you little peons. You should vote for me so I can tell you how to run your life. And it was very insulting.
It just shows you how misplaced the judgment
and how it
was
just out
on the part of the Democrats.
just
really.
the disconnect.
Right.
Yeah.
To insult 50% of the electorate, before you even
it was bad enough when
go into the
we
booth.
were bitter clangers, but
Well,
now
I was
we're
going to say that
deplorable.
because was it 4 years ago that we heard, or was it 8 years ago from President Obama that we heard that we were the Rust Belt, that same group of people really were referred to as bitter clingers
Right.
of their guns and their religion.
Yeah.
But it didn't catch. It didn't catch on. Yes, there were a few people like us who still remember the phrase, but by and large, people didn't internalize that and say, I don't like that, I'm voting against it, or I'm reacting to it when I go to the polls. But this time it did. Do you think it was just that people have gotten to the tipping point that what didn't resonate 4 or 8 years ago is resonating now because we've lived now under what we see as a liberal, progressive environment for 8 years?
I think it was Hillary. I mean,
it was the messenger.
Say what you want about Barack Obama, but he could be a likable person. There's not a lot likable about Hillary Clinton. And so I think it was her making that statement that just really turned people off.
I agree.
And it was also the media's role in the sense that they didn't focus on the insulting character of these comments, and they were willing to let them pass. And I think people, after a while, ordinary voters recognize there's just a falsity in here, as they did with the actual coverage of Trump, because it was so obviously anti-Trump across the board.
Well, and then his message about the crooked media, he went from crooked Hillary to the crooked media, and I think that further angered people that they felt they weren't even getting the truth from the media. They weren't even getting a true story from the media. There's a lot to be said now. You listen to the different news reports, you listen to the different political pundits, and they're all kind of trying to analyze why Trump won. And some are coming to the point that say Trump didn't win because of who he is. The others lost because of who they were. Hillary Clinton lost because of who she is. Poor candidate. Laws don't apply to her. It was a repudiation of President Obama's 8 years that people are finding they're just not being successful of. Do you think Trump won because of Trump, or do you think he won because the others really lost? That's kind of an intellectual question, I guess.
I think Trump won on his own. And as an illustration of this, as we're aware, toward the very end of the campaign, just days before and the week before the election, we had the release of all these WikiLeaks and other documents that show just how corrupt the Democrats were, how collusive the media were with the Democrats. Day after day, more of this compounded.
It was really a barrage.
It was, but I think even apart from this, the American electorate had made the decision. They wanted a total break with anyone connected with the establishment, and Donald Trump was seen as the medium of that total break. And it should be borne in mind. Here's where my philosophical background is going to come to play slightly. When Aristotle spoke about the quality necessary for a political leader, the manifest quality was something he called phronesis in Greek, or political or practical wisdom. Now, this is a leadership skill, and to illustrate it, suppose you enter into a building and you're on an elevator among strangers. You don't know anyone on the elevator. Suddenly something goes wrong with the elevator. It stops. You would recognize a leader as a person who could take charge there and control the tendency toward panic. So it's a native quality in a person. And I think American people recognize that Donald Trump had this quality, even though he had no political past whatever.
Experience.
And so I think that it was, even though many of his voters were probably reluctant to admit so, they thought they saw in him a man who could lead and make decisions, and the right decisions.
Frank.
I was going to say, I go back to President Nixon when he talked about the silent majority.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we saw was the silent majority decided not to be silent this time. They wanted to get out and make their voice heard. It's been an undercurrent in our politics for 40 years or more. But for some reason, they just never came out in force. And then maybe what John said, they saw it in Trump that this was the time to come out and stand up for what they really thought and not let the establishment railroad them into their choice.
One of the groups that really surprised me that came out wholeheartedly for Trump as an electoral group were the evangelicals. Now, when you think of Donald Trump, you hardly think of someone who has a lot of strong, what's
moral.
the word I want to say? Yeah, moral or
Spiritual?
Spiritual maybe
yeah.
is a better word. Sort of perspective on a lot of things. I don't look at him as one that's either a Bible thumper or somebody who
Right.
even calls upon God as routinely as he goes through life. We could be wrong, but he's not led that piece of his life, let it show if that's really part of him. But yet when you heard people who are nationally renowned people of faith, evangelicals, when I would talk to some people here at FATV who are known religious and spiritually leading people, they would talk about the leadership they found in Donald Trump and were supporting him from a very base root of who they are, of people of faith. Why do you think he was able to reach so deeply into the evangelical community? They really went out for him.
Maybe because they felt or they understood that he wasn't a threat. I mean, I think of Hillary Clinton and Democrats, and they're kind of like godless. Maybe that's wrong of me to say that on TV, so. but I do. But with Donald Trump, he was going to protect their religious freedoms.
Well,
and so they felt comfortable, regardless of anything he said or what the media said. They still felt comfortable that he would protect what they believed
Right.
in.
You could trust Trump on the Constitution, is what it came down to. And he didn't have to talk about it much. I mean, it was clear, like when he announced his list of potential appointees to the Supreme Court, you know, they were all people on whom evangelicals could agree, as well as solid constitutional scholars. You know, so he was not, there was no debate about where his loyalty lay. It lay in the Constitution. And I think this was perceived by people across the board. He was not, God knows, he's not a political philosopher. He's not knowledgeable about the Constitution in the way that Ted Cruz is. But still, there was this sentiment of trust and a loyalty, a sentiment that this man can be trusted. Whereas the existing regime cannot be. I mean, that's so clearly proven this.
I think the word trust is the correct word there, because people just did not feel they could trust Hillary Clinton. Period. You know, and the people of faith looked at Trump as someone they could trust.
What about James Comey? 10 days before the election, thereabouts, it came to, and we were actually in the middle of our early voting in Massachusetts, and James Comey comes out and he wants to revisit, very publicly comes out and he wants to revisit the whole, I can't even remember now what it was. What was
emails?
It was the
emails,
and that
the
whole
emails.
structure of the Clinton Foundation and all of that, casting
a lot
of
private server,
casting a lot of doubt again on her credibility, and then as quick as he came out and cast that doubt, 10 days later, the Sunday before the election, again, part of early voting, he comes out and says, I've changed my mind.
The 650,000 emails that people said could not possibly be read before the election, magically
he was able to
read.
breeze through.
Yeah.
Do you think that ultimately had any impact at all on her vote?
Yes, it most definitely did, because I think people saw the duplicity of the Obama administration in controlling the output from the Justice Department, and I think it really was people looked at it and said, "Wait a minute, we just cannot trust this whole deal here. We can't trust Obama. We can't trust Clinton."
So you think it actually did make
I think it did, yes.
An impact, a negative impact for Hillary, a positive impact for Trump.
I somewhat disagree, only in the sense that I agree with you, Frank, that people who were on top of this, who actually read what was released, that cemented their distrust and contempt for the present administration. But many people didn't read it. And I think their sentiments were essentially made up beforehand. So I don't think in that sense that it meant that much. What it did show was that Comey's, I think, ruined himself. his
it probably
career. I don't
said
think
more
he was
about
gonna,
Comey than it said about the two candidates.
It's his fancy stepping here to try to keep ahead of, keep favor in whoever is in charge, I don't think is going to work. And I think he'll be swept aside. I don't see how he can be trusted.
Kathy,
I just thought the timing was very odd. I mean, I do know people who usually voted Democrat who voted for Trump this time, and they said because of the emails, it just turned them off to her.
But that was already baked into the system. They had made up their mind.
They had already made, they were early voters. They had already made up their mind. It may have maybe a small slice of whoever was still on the fence, although I really don't believe there were that many people still on the fence. Maybe it stopped people from voting at all because fewer people voted for her. So there may have been people who just decided, I'm not going to vote at all.
One thing that surprised me when that came out on a Friday afternoon, because I was part of early voting in Fitchburg, I actually asked our city clerk, Anna Farrow, that Monday morning, how many phone calls did you get about people wanting to re-vote, pull back their vote, come in and vote again? And she said, none. So that kind of goes that whatever impact it made, at least for early voters, it was already baked into the system.
Maybe early voters knew who they were going to vote for.
Yeah.
And if you waited until election day, maybe you're waiting to get a little bit more information.
Money in campaigns. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. Hillary Clinton outspent Donald Trump in the campaign. Now, these are kind of interesting statistics because one of the things I saw, they actually bring it down to cost per vote. Donald Trump spent just under $4.50 per vote to Hillary Clinton's over $9 per vote. So we're talking, she spent twice as much, or he spent half as much. Hillary Clinton's campaign raised $513 million and spent, this was through mid-October, $450 million. Trump raised $255 million and spent $239 million. Do you think what spending, and it's all outrageous as far as I'm concerned. I mean, these kinds of dollar values are just hideous. But do you think it's telling us something about the quality of the candidates and money being spent in campaigns, that maybe money isn't the be-all and the end-all to winning campaigns? Obviously, money didn't win this campaign.
I just think it showed how much harder they thought they had to work to get the Democrats to get their candidate elected. I mean, they just had to work that much harder and spend that much more money to get their message out to people. Whereas Donald Trump, his followers just kind of knew what they wanted, and they didn't have to be what's the word I want? Coaxed or persuaded. Yeah. Thank you. Coaxed or persuaded.
Even the night before the campaign, or the night before Election Day, we had Donald Trump giving several, just his regular stump speeches to tens of thousands of people at each stop, but we had Hillary Clinton flanked by all of the celebrities of the music world, basically. And it's that even though it was a come-on, it didn't seem to serve her well.
Also, well, to bear in mind that well before the election, you had indicators that the American people, in various geographic areas, were highly dissatisfied with what was going on and wanted the establishment replaced. The most obvious case maybe is Eric Cantor in Virginia, who was in line to become Speaker of the House. He was replaced by an unknown professor in a minor college, and I read somewhere that this was a Professor Bratt, I think his name is, who defeated Cantor. He had a total budget of $175,000. Competing against Cantor, who had close to $10 million.
Almost an unlimited war chest.
So the money was not a factor. The people didn't want Cantor, and the people didn't want Clinton.
Why did the media get it so wrong? The national pollsters and the media, they
got
it wrong. They were we were more on target than they were.
The short answer is because the media is part of the establishment. They're part of the establishment. The media, we of course have known this. We're all sort of news junkies as well as political junkies. And anyone who watches the major media or reads the major print media cannot be unaware that they are in the pocket for the Democrat Party, for liberal interests. And this is true, unfortunately, even with respect to media such as Fox, which have a reputation of being conservative, because many individuals on Fox certainly did not display any favor toward Trump, and they were very much opposed to Trump. One of the most surprising things, and if Justin were here, he would agree with this because I spoke with him, was we watched, if you watched the election night around the 10:30 hour or so, when it became clear that Trump was going to win, or there was a great possibility he was winning, to see the expression on the face of Megyn Kelly on Fox. You know, she was really upset by this. So there was a media culture, and this is one thing that we really have to get into our skulls. This media culture is still out there. It still is establishment. It still is opposed to mavericks like Trump and the people he's bringing in with him. They're still going to be enemies in the future.
We have just less than a minute, so I want you to be quick. But do you have high hopes for the Trump-Mike Pence presidency? Kathy?
Yes, because I think he's going to go out of his way to put the best people in around him.
John?
And we've seen evidence of that already. In the appointments he's made, it's almost like a beautiful revolution taking place before your eyes. But it's going to be very hard. Even if he makes the right decisions, the media again will be against him. Down the line, they'll make mountains out of molehills, as we know, because that's what they do.
As they have already.
They have already, exactly.
And will continue to do so.
Right.
But yes, I think we have 2 years in which we can look for some great changes in Washington.
Why do you say 2 years?
Because we have control of the House and the Senate for the next 2
Okay.
years,
Right.
and then we'll see what happens after that.
Okay.
If we do a good job, then we'll probably have control of the House and Senate for 2 more years. Okay.
And it should be borne in mind that, in a way, Obama's been hoisted on his own petard. That is to say, he took choices about how he was going to get his programs through, and these choices explicitly ignored and indeed insulted the role of the Congress. So he issued hundreds of executive orders. Just as they were easily issued, they can be easily dismissed and withdrawn. And that's something Trump can do right away.
Thank you, gang. Thank you, our esteemed presidential panel, Kathy Goguen, John Strang, and Frank Ardinger. Thank you all for coming back. And you know what? Maybe we need to plan another show a couple of months down the line, and we'll catch up on how things are going. And we thank you for watching Your Right to Know and sitting in with us tonight as the Fitchburg Republican City Committee has our show, Your Right to Know. Remember that your local city or town Republican Committee is your only grassroots organization that supports and holds dear your liberty, your constitutional rights, and conservative values. We encourage you to join us. Why? Because to us, GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity, and because we always stand for freedom. Thank you, and good night, and may God bless America and Donald Trump. Thank you.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and